Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Pause the video right now to check out my social media, my radio show, and thatdrummerguy.com. And most of all, enjoy the following presentation. You know, the great thing about it is being able to be in that opportunity to be able to promote this new album, The Banished Heart, which I've just gotten the chance to be able to listen to over the course of this week, and it just feels like such a great natural progression for where you guys have come. I mean, like, the more brutal parts are more brutal, the more doomy parts are more doomy, the melodic parts are more melodic, just everything just feels like such a great natural progression.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's definitely, it's like hypercolor, you know? It's like the contrast of the things that we've done and that we do anyway. They do kind of bleed out and reach a little further. But it's easy. We had really good subject matter this time around, so it kind of fed into the album a lot better. And what was really cool about, like, especially on my part, is that I tracked the record while I was getting ready for my other band, Insect Warfare, to do some reunion shows.
Oh, yes.
And so since we were headlining the Maryland Death Fest last year, I obviously had to be on my fucking tiptoes. So by the time we were tracking or getting ready to track this record, I was in the middle of full double band rehearsals and 5-day-a-week plan and all kinds of stuff. So it was it was good. It was awesome. It was good for me as a player and also cathartic for me as a musician and a human. So. And
definitely one good positive that came from that, when you had to start recording the blast that's on this album, I mean, practicing and doing shows with Insect Warfare made sure that your chops were in check.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's another great thing, too. I mean, when you look at Insect Warfare and you look at Oceans of Slumber, I mean, the diversity of what you're able to do and being able to play what both bands need and, just like making sure that everything's covered the way that you can do it. I mean, it's really awesome to see that you're in that kind of position to be able to do two very different styles like that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, man, it's just, you deal with numbers all the time. It's just vocabulary,
Oh, yeah.
And so if you're dealing with some, let's say, neophyte caveman type statement, it's so easy to use the basic stuff, and it's not to say easy. You know what I mean? No, it's like if the statement is meant to be one of just straight violence and brutality, and then I have a kind of a wealth of knowledge and wording for that. And then when it comes to Oceans, it's like the ease of how that fits into what we do is a lot simpler than you would expect. It's obviously the additional things that I can express or say, come into play a bit more. But man, I mean, it's just all numbers. Shit, it's it's just finding different ways to land on one, and that's all I'm ever trying to do as a drummer. It's just trying to make sure that I can punctuate things in places and then still land back on one, which sometimes I have a good chance of doing that.
Yeah, and, along with that, too, I mean, it's very therapeutic to, to have, one side of you where you're able to explore all these different territories, and another one where you're able to just show off your chaotic brutality of what you can do on the drums, and other projects along the way as well. I mean, just being able to show off all those different styles and different bands and projects, I mean, it's great to be able to show that off.
Yeah, I mean, man, if it was, if it's heard by many or few, I mean, it's I'm absolutely 1,000% just a musician. So this is just it's just a way for me to kind of express the things and needs and feelings and stuff that I have. I mean, it's one of those things to where, because my background goes all the way back to the, late 90s. And so I've done, from Viral Load to some of this thing, like the Sex of Expiration and Verbal Dominion, these are cult death metal bands, but, it's like my background being in that, it was all super evil, brutal death metal, which I enjoyed so much because of the darkness of it, the way it sounded. It's, everything was serious. There weren't really any tongue-in-cheek goofy songs. It wasn't a Cannibal Corpse thing or I can't say obituary so much, but it was coming from a place of reality or dead seriousness, and so it was a good place for me to cut my teeth and kind of learn what I wanted to do. So it's I've always the coolest part about playing like grindcore, death, and black metal is that it was kind of like limitless, and so it's not so much it was that I was able to be as active or as kind of intense as I wanted to be. So as you say, like with the ability to kind of like profile each style of music, or like let's say for Midnight Warfare and Oceans of Slumber, it's like I'm lucky, it's like. Most people that do a style of music kind of stick to one style, and for me, like, I enjoy doom and progressive stuff as much as I do death, black, and grind. So, and it all kind of mixes and makes sense to me.
Oh yeah, and I love doing that myself, even if it's just practicing by myself or any of the bands I've been a part of. I mean, I love exploring all those different styles, and just trying to incorporate new things into my playing, making sure my chops are in check, and of course making sure that the style of music that I'm playing, whatever it is, just my parts are gonna fit what's needed for the project.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes it helps to think outside that, not be boxed in. It's like with a lot of this music, things that I've heard is that like the type of my style of playing is too busy for some people, and for me it's like more orchestrated. Like I'm against the drum machine style band, and when we play live, and let's say when Insect Warfare plays live or any of these other bands, it's like there's a definite real feeling of intensity there, and it's from like approaching it differently or thinking outside the box. And I play as much R&B and funk style music as I do extreme music. So for me, like melding those styles is again, like I said, the punctuation thing. It's like there's a lot more times to where I feel like fitting in sixes into like 8-note clusters and shit. And so if the feel is some 4-bar thing and you're expecting some subdivision of that, 8/16s or something, and for me, it's the paradiddle or paradiddle diddle, some kind of 6-stroke roll or something like that. Like I feel that more, and then mixing that into let's say 6-stroke roll with 8th notes on the ending of it, or 16th notes. And that's something that I grew up listening to with bands like Sadist and Gene Hoglan playing, and with Death and Dark Angel and all that kind of shit. So it comes from a place.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of that, going back into the new Oceans of Slumber album, I mean, there's some incredible parts that are coming from your end, like ideas that I never would have imagined fitting in a certain part that just fits so very well. With that, how did you approach the drum tracking for this album?
We sussed out most of the record in the rehearsal studio. The only song that was constructed full band-wise in the studio was a song called Howl of the Rougarou, and that was an absolute ode to Arcturus, with the opening band section being 6, it's all in 8s, and the sequence is 6/7, 6/8, and with that rotation kind of constantly evolving. So we had 6/8, 7/8, 6/8, 8/8, or depending on how your nomenclature would be counted, because a lot of that stuff can be broken in 16s. Most of the records and most of the stuff that I ever record is about 85 to 90% locked in, and then about 10% improvisation, kind of depending on the feel of the take or the feel of me that day, So I have an idea, and then I'll have 6 or 7 ways of approaching it. So we'll do a ton of takes, and then we go back there and kind of comp however, whatever makes the most sense, or because I could have 2 or 3 takes of the same song that I'm feeling, and then I go back and listen to it, and we'll sit on it for a week or so, and then I'll kind of choose from that. So going into it, it was the record it's a dark record, it's meant to be very dark, and it's incredibly serious. And so I wanted kind of the more visceral or the more involved things that kept the movement of the album going more. And so that's pretty much the approach of it. It was just, hey, we know the basic parts, the basic structure of what everything's going to be. Now make the thing feel organic or make it feel live,
Yeah, and that's what's so important. And I'm glad to hear that's your style of what you want to do for drum parts. I mean, being able to have that openness or that improvisation in there, because that really does make it feel more real rather than something you could just make on a drum machine. I mean, when you have that openness, when you have that improvisation, I just love that so much. And you can hear those little nuances, especially if you listen for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing. thing. It's like I could take the same song live and play it 3 or 4 different ways, like just in the blink of an eye. And the reason why is because we're constantly shifting stuff. You're a human being. We both are. I hope. It's like daily things change and things evolve, and who we are as players and how you feel on that day. And there are bands that pull shit off like 100% what the record is, and drummers that write like incredible stuff, like Dan Pressman from Now Blood Scars. He's like the fucking machine. And I got to tour with him for 7 weeks, and then you watch him and you're like, man, it's admirable what you do and you're incredibly good at it. But then when I look at him, I'm like, I'm absolutely not the same kind of drummer as you are. And it's like, for me, if I'm going through a certain thing in a certain span of time, like it's going to come out when we play live, and it's going to be more vicious or more intense or more sad or melancholy, and so when we record something, is the best way that's ever been explained to me is it's a window in time, and so when I track these parts on this album, this particular record, I was going through a certain thing and a certain major life change, and I can hear it on the record, and it's on the record, people can hear it on the record, and so it's approaching something like very real to me in a very real way. And so when we play it live, it's the same way. It's like I said, 90% of the stuff's going to be exactly how it is on the record, because that's the meat, the meat and potatoes of it. But there's stuff that's going to be accented. There's going to be changes. I changed, and time has changed, and it's not January of 2017, and it's like I'm not going through to replicate that. It's the same thing with guitar solos and all that kind of shit. The guys hammer out 90 or so percent, and then there's little margins of error and margins of flair, and that's what we're shooting for. Try to make the moment special.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what I really do appreciate about the album. And just like you touched on just a few seconds ago about how really dark this album is. I mean, currently right now I'm going through a lot of dark emotional stuff in my personal life, and then when I finally got this promo, pretty much at the hex of all of that happening, I think it was just like the appropriate time to be able to check this out and reassess myself with those emotions that you can go through when you're going through dark times. And I imagine it's going to be a very therapeutic thing for you when you do have tragedy in your life and you're able to show it off in a musical way like this and be able to share it with other people, because other people struggle just as much, and it's something that's very relatable in this style of music.
Oh, of course. And we go through this thing to where we're kind of taught from a very early age of how unique and special we all are, but we're actually not. And the similarities between what we do and what we go through, they're all categorized in 3 or 4 separate types of things, like depending on your personality type. And so, as you say, you're not impervious to painful life changes or things in your life and these darknesses, and neither am I. It's like, obviously we're all completely susceptible to these types of things, and we're lucky as musicians, we're lucky to have one of the highest ways of self-expression for this, and I know that you're drum focused, but it's like when we go through something like this and a record like this, it's like if you listen to our vocalists, you can really feel it, you can really hear it, and that's what makes this type of stuff special to us and to me, and again, I feel lucky to that she's our singer, and that I had the ability to put my feelings into this record, and hell, that I had the ability to practice and to develop myself to be able to express these things. And that's the other part of it. Like a lot of people don't understand. It's you don't just sit down and hammer out a bunch of singles and now all of a sudden you're a fucking drummer. It's like you got to sit down and you got to put time into the craft, because if if you've got 25 words in your vocabulary, you're going to have a pretty fucking stark and one-sided conversation. And if you expand your vocabulary as a player to these new heights and go into these new directions, learning new styles of music, well, then you kind of open the door to be able to say and do whatever it is that you want to. And that's that's what we should all be striving for as musicians, to expand that palette.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, whether it is a drummer, whether it's one of the string instruments, whether it's the vocals, I mean, whatever you choose to do in a musical path, just like you said, being able to expand upon that vocabulary, because you never know which emotions you're going to need and whatever's going to be coming up in the future whenever you do write a song. You never know where inspiration's going to hit. So when you have all of these tools that you're able to choose from and be able to fit things together, you'll be able to expand upon it so much more and have things mean so much more.
Oh, of course. And I had I really, Cammy and I are we're boyfriend and girlfriend, and She reads a lot, and I'm heavily into reading and kind of searching out stuff. And she's been getting into Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. It's kind of like the basis of Stoicism. And one of the kind of paraphrase things, it's like, you've got a toolbox to do all these things in life, and then you only have a fucking hammer, And it's a really fucked up analogy, because it's like, you've had time to build this toolbox up, and you should be prepared to deal with all these things, and then I open it, and you just got a fucking hammer, and that's how you've been dealing with things your whole life, and this is how you express yourself. You've got a hammer, and it's like, okay, well, you're a drummer now, or you're a fucking pianist or a guitarist. It's like, well, what do you have in your toolbox? It's like, I have a hammer, I've got a screwdriver, and that's it. And it's just like, well, man, you've got time, and obviously every single thing you could ever want to learn on the drum kit is just sitting on the fucking internet, like on YouTube. I'm older. I come from the time when we didn't, I couldn't, if I was 20 and was able to go on the internet or go on YouTube and see what I can find now, Christ, I feel so, it's crazy, because you'll see some younger drummers and you're like, man, I've tried my whole life to get this good, and I'm just where I'm at now, and it's all like, you've been playing for a year and a half, and you've caught up to everything except for experience,
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how technology is able to help people like that as well, but, just like you also said, experience is such a huge important thing about it, because, it's playing those live shows, it's doing the touring, it's doing recordings and stuff like that, where you are able to build up all of that into new experiences with the live shows and recording, and being able to see what actually works and what doesn't.
Oh, yeah. I mean, nothing replaces, at all. And it's like the sadly recently fallen persecuted comedian Louis C.K. said, he's like, a fucking 45-year-old subway worker has a million more years of experience than a goddamn doctor does. He's like, the doctor went to school, he experienced all these things that have to do with school, and learned all this shit and shut himself away, and that's what he knows, and he's just a brilliant doctor. But when it comes to, terrible shit that happens in the day-to-day life of doing something 30 years straight, he's like, you can't replicate that, because you can't replicate experience or experiences. The only thing that does that is time under tension or time under pressure. So, being a good session drummer, or the guy that played in live bands 250 nights out of the year, or rehearsed that much, like, that guy's going to have something that you can't just fake, mostly. Sometimes you do run across a dude that's been jamming a whole lot and he just ain't shit, and it sucks, but that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes, I guess.
Oh, that's true. And speaking of experience, I mean, especially when it comes to, like, dark experience, you guys were able to get, like, one of the most prolific names in, like, dark experiences, with Tom England being able to guest on the album. With Evergrey being one of my favorite bands of all time, it's awesome to see the connection that you were able to have with Evergrey when it comes to, like, touring, and now being able to have Tom on the album. It's so cool to see that.
So that's one of your favorite bands?
Yeah, Evergrey. I love them.
Oh, that's amazing. It's absolutely one of my favorite bands on the planet. One of the most consistent metal bands that's ever existed, with 10 records that are fucking phenomenal. And, so since The Dark Discovery came out, their first record, they were on a compilation for SOD. I don't know if you remember that magazine, Sounds of Death.
Oh, yeah.
For some odd reason, Evergrey pops up on a Sounds of Death compilation, because they mostly specialized in, death metal, black metal, grindcore. There was a comp around 98, something like that, which is funny to talk about music from 1998.
20 years ago already.
Yeah, right. So there was SOD had a magazine. It was around it. Evergrey's song Black and Dawn was on it. And, that's back in the day when all we could do was listen to comps and find new bands, right? It's just how you did everything. So I put the comp in, it was playing, and then that came on. I was like, what the fuck is this? It's like Suffocation with a dude singing over it. And I was just like, oh man, like, this is my favorite band in the fucking world. And it wasn't until 99, I think it was 1999, the November to Dismember Festival in San Antonio, Texas. Jasmine St. Clair was there, and this is after she did her billion guy gangbang or whatever it is she did. There was like this whole era of time whenever a chick doing 1,000 guys in a day was like a thing. Like, oh, great. She was at a booth, and right beside that booth was another distro where she was signing stuff. Well, this guy had The Dark Discovery there, like on Digipack, and so I bought the 2 copies that he had so I could spread the word. And I drove home, and I listened to the whole record, and I was like, oh man, this is like cooler than I could ever expect it, And so from then on, like, I found a way to get everything they had until they got proper distribution over here. And about 6-7 years ago, they were here in Houston, and they didn't play any songs off the first record. And I was buzzed, and Tom was hanging out after the show, and I was like, you fucking gypped us. You didn't play any songs off the first 2 records, and this is why you had a bad show tonight, and this is why you ain't gonna have no fun, and just kind of going back and forth talking shit to each other. And it wound up with us going back to my guitar player's house and drinking a bunch of beer and taking them over there so they can go to the swimming pool until we stayed up until like 5 o'clock in the morning fucking partying and hanging out. And then from there, it just turned into a long-standing friendship, and now he and I are super good friends, and our guitar player and, everybody else in the band is, we're just close, So while I was going through my personal turmoils, which involved my separation from my long 20-year relationship with my now ex-wife, if you're a fan of Evergrey, you know that Tom's pretty much a psychologist anyways.
Oh, yes.
All he talks about is, it's just loss and terrible shit.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've been back and forth about a bunch of things, and then I guess he could just, he could always tell, and he was like, hey, man, so how are things? And I'll tell him, and he'd be like, no, like, how are things, really? Like, you can talk to me about this shit, let's talk. And so we talked about crap, and he had heard, obviously he'd listened to Oceans of Slumber a bunch, and he, because I played the piano and I write a lot, he was all like, I should start a band. And I was like, oh, fuck, like, like a little kid moment, like, oh my God, you start a band, man, you have a band together, it's the coolest thing ever. We got to talking about stuff, and I was like, look, before we talk about working on some kind of side project, I was like, would we do a duet on our record? And he's like, of course, let me hear the song and make sure it ain't something that I'm going to screw up or that I sound shitty, And so then I sent him No Color, No Light, and he was all like, oh, absolutely, And to me, the kinship between rhythm and blues and soul music and what they pertain to me and like doom metal, like they're exactly the same types of music. They're just in different lanes. And so between Cammy and Tom, here we got basically gospel, soul, vocalistic metal, and got our metalheads. And, the rest is kind of just history as much as it can be.
Oh, that's just absolutely amazing how that can go from that. I mean, just like from a compilation CD of checking out Evergrey for the first time to being able to possibly starting up a new side project together after all this time. It's just awesome to see a friendship being able to bud like that.
Yeah, it's man, I mean, honestly, for one, if you don't get out and around and you got to see the world somehow, like, take a fucking trip and leave the States and go find like-minded people and all that stuff. But, us, like, being metalheads and musicians, like, we've already got things kind of teared down, So if you walk up to another person and you're like, hey, you don't have to be a drummer, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm a drummer, well, like, fuck, we've already got something in common. We can talk about this stuff, especially if you're serious,
Oh,
you're like, oh, well, Steve Gadd, like, do you like Paradiddle shuffles? And he's like, oh, fuck yeah, I like Paradiddle. It's like you can just talk about that forever. And JoJo Mayer, you're like, oh, that's my shit. And did you watch the drum battle between JoJo Mayer and Steve Smith, and watch Steve Smith just come perform with JoJo Mayer, which is something I never thought I'd see in my whole life, And so then you can have these conversations, and you're, fuck, we already hit it off. And then you start adding the metal, and then you start adding the fact that we're into the same types of metal, and well, boom, Like, I've had too many small world incidences in my life that I don't believe in the stuff anymore, It's like I know that it exists, and I know that there are close friends on the other side of the planet for each one of us, And that's exactly what that was. That's what happened.
Yeah, and again, that's another great thing about, like, technology is being able to stay in touch with people like that. I mean, if you go through, like, social media and you notice someone that's talking about drums or a certain drummer or a certain band or whatever, you're able to make those kind of connections and be able to have those real thought-provoking conversations about your craft or other things in life.
Yeah, it's we've always got this inclination towards, like, tribalism and the tribe. And it's a great thing, and it's a terrible thing because that's how you get all those fucking stupid asses that are able to link up now via social media, like the alt-right idiots and all that crap.
That's true.
But with that, it comes a greater degree of better. And there's some of us that seek knowledge and the beyond and everything else, and don't look at everything as some biased outlook. Because I would assume that you are probably much like we and I am. And it's I'm not looking in places to find people that agree with me. I'm looking in places to find things that like tantalize or that stimulate. It's the Chris Hitchens thing where he talks about you can't devise some outlook or some theology strictly based off of a one-sided outlook or ideal. And it's like you if you're trying to come up with the best analogy of A and B, you need to know the most about A and B separately that you possibly can, you know, and technology makes that fucking amazing. You know, of course, we've got our hiccups, and we'll get past that, but you know, some of my best, or, you know, some of my closest friends are from England or the Czech Republic or Sweden or Norway, and it's people that, if we didn't have these technologies, that I would never have met in my life, and that's, I feel fortunate for that, you know?
Yeah, and, you know, just like you said, I mean, you can apply that to drumming, you can apply that to music, you can apply it to all aspects of life. The more that you learn, the more that you're able to see different sides of an argument, different sides of what could be, that knowledge is always going to be beneficial because you can see both sides of what's going on and be able to make your stance from there and be able to progress in life that much easier.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's, I mean, hell, it's, you know, I guess it comes with time, and, you know, when we're 20, we don't see that kind of outlook. You're kind of just like me, just pissing in the wind and nothing can take me down, you know. Then that changes. At some point, you get some awakening or some eye-opening moment, and you're like, well, I need to hear what you're saying, or I need to investigate further. And especially when you get into music, it becomes a singular path. You see everybody, and you're influenced by all these things. You have all these kind of things playing into the fire. But most people wouldn't understand what Brendan Perry from Dead Can Dance has to do with my drumming. You know, and it's like, well, why is what he's saying, you know, that's such an influence on you as a musician? It's like, what's the lyrical content? And by that, I don't mean what he's saying or anything. It's like how he's phrasing, or how he's doing these things, or writing these parts, or how Rachmaninoff or Scriabin or any of these late-era romantic Russian composers, or, you know, it's like it's finding a way to blend all these things together for you to make your ultimate statement, or a statement at all. And it just comes with time, you know. I mean, for me, I think I've gotten better at it over time, and I hope that's what the case would be. But some people come to this conclusion way earlier in life, and they get better earlier, and that's fucking awesome. Some people, it takes a while.
Well, I can definitely say from the fan perspective, I mean, being a fan of so much of what you've done in the past and currently, you know, I really love what you did with this new album. I mean, I feel that personal growth that's going on there, both musically, thematically, instrumentation-wise. I mean, everything just, again, like I mentioned before, it feels like it's so natural, so organic, and really comes from the heart. Like, every single soulful moment on there has its purpose, and you wouldn't necessarily get that if you don't put your whole body and soul into what you're doing. Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's hard to tell, though. Thank you, by the way. I mean, it's fucking awesome. I'm glad you listened to the stuff. But you know, some people have the ability to make records that feel like that, and, you know, it might not come from this. It might be like a whatever stance from them, or they're just kind of projecting or hiding, you know, to where you're like, oh, I don't want to back like them. You know, I'm so deep, or I'm putting any of this shit into it. It's just kind of whatever. It's one of those things like Flo Mornier. If you're listening to None So Vile, and you're like, man, what the fuck was going through your head when you were making this? And I was like, was it just trying to make it through the record because it's so fucking chaotic sounding? Or, you know, like, was there something going on, or what was, you know, like, what was life happening, what was life like during this time? Or, you know, for me, it's one of the best death metal drumming records on the planet. And obviously it's not perfect in any way, and that's what makes it so fucking amazing. You know, it's like we've computerized, quantized the life out of fucking recordings, when that is one of the most intense drum recordings that's ever been created, you know?
Oh, yes. Yeah, and I just feel like that so much, too. I mean, like, especially when you go to a live show or something, I mean, it's never going to be 100% all the time. It's never going to be note for note for what's on the album, unless the album's actually playing instead of the live musicians. And when you get into that live tracking as well, I mean, obviously a click track can help in some aspects, but, you know, it's like if you hear an occasional rim click, if you hear like a missed cymbal that's supposed to be there, or if you hear like a double that's not supposed to be there, that's what gives the music life, rather than feeling like everything has to be so perfect and quantized like you were talking about, and just like making it picture perfect takes that human element out of it.
Yeah, well, and at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about that. They're the guys that can take the record and replicate it, you know, 98 to 100%, and that's crazy. You know, it's admirable and it's awesome. And then there are the guys that you watch that completely blow your fucking mind, you know, to where you're like, you know, oh my God, and like tonight this dude's like spun up and he's playing faster, or he's feeling it more. It's, you know, it's like watching Celtic Frost when they did their reunion tour. They were playing Procreation of the Wicked to like half speed, and I was like, oh, this is what it was meant to sound like. It's supposed to be a doom song because it sounds so insanely fucking heavy.
Oh yes.
But when you go and watch you know, and a lot of it only exists these days in like grindcore or this cult death metal movement. You go see bands, you know, there's these bands. It's like the black and white covers, Mortiferum and Cemetery Urn and all these bands, and you go watch them and you're just all like, this is like the essence of what this was. It's like, there's no fucking click track, there's no backing track. It's a drummer just beating the fucking hell out of the drum kit who's very fucking able, you know, and you're like, this is amazing. It's, you know, there's this dude from here in Texas, Brian Fajardo. He plays for a band called PLF.
Oh, yes.
He's one of these guys. He fucking plays every night. He's just fucking busts his ass. He's fucking, and someone would call him a one-trick pony, and then I would call him, like, you know, a marvel at consistency. You know, it's like what you're doing, you're fucking perfect at, you know. And you go see it, it's like one of the most intense things you've ever seen. Also, it's toured Japan a couple times. Some of the bands that we played with, there's a band called Palm, and this cat named, their drummer is Toshi, and it's like just watching, you know, these guys that are like, they're part of the music movement. They're not part of like just being some cam, Instagram show off or any of this kind of stuff. Like these guys like live and bleed this stuff. And they're some of the best drummers I've ever seen in my life, and they're virtually unknown, you know. Everybody's shooting to be the next Eric Moore, which, you know, obviously he's a fucking phenom, but it's like, you know, you guys are missing the music element of it. It's like you can be as bad as a fucking drummer as you want to be, but you also need to have a band behind you that's worth a shit.
Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, it's one thing to always be at home and being able to practice and, you know, watching the YouTube videos and being able to learn all this stuff, but it's another thing to be able to get with a group of musicians and different groups of musicians if you get that opportunity and be able to play music with them and have things make sense and, you know, just get that feeling of should you play with the bass? Should you follow vocal melodies? Should you do something that contrasts with the guitar riffs? You know, learning all these different things that you might not necessarily be able to do if you're just by yourself.
Well, it's practical application. I mean, how are you supposed to do any of this stuff without the influence or the, you know, the kind of the overall of what a group activity is going to do? It's like, you know, fuck, you can be the most phenomenal, you know, look at Thomas Lang. Thomas Lang's a phenomenal drummer. Like, name the last thing worth of shit he's ever played on, you know, and it's like, he's got a couple of things, a couple projects here and there, and he's made an absolute career out of it because he is a fucking spectacular drummer. But these other guys aren't Thomas Lang, you know, and it's like, when are they gonna? I mean, it's when do you not so much assimilate, but when do you start using all this gift and tools to be in something that works or be into something that does more? You know, Marco Miniman and Thomas Lang and Virgil Donati. I mean, you know, Virgil Donati obviously a little more active because Alan Holdsworth in his own band. But it's like, it's one of these things. It's like you guys are looking at these even rarer than NBA stars, and you're thinking you're going to be the next NBA star. It's all like, what you should do is like, let's try to put this into a realistic situation. Let's use all this talent and all this ability that you have, and let's find a good band and put you into it, and let's see what happens then, you know?
Yeah, it's so true. And I hope at some point more people will be able to think like that again. I always know, like, the styles of music always seems to work in circles, and a lot of times, or at least for the last few years, like, it's really been noting about, like, showing off to the best of your abilities because of it being so easy to show yourself off on YouTube. But I think it's going to be coming back around again, where being with a group of musicians and making the best music possible is going to be the way that things are going to go.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I hope. Because, I mean, right now, I mean, with everybody finding out about, like, monetizing YouTube and, you know, it's like, why should we change anything? Or we should just keep doing what we're doing because, you know, they're succeeding in some kind of way. And then it's like, you know, you're not in service to yourself and you're not in service to your fellow man if you're not, like, really creating something that they can use. If you're Floyd Wright or Mike Johnston or somebody who's educating, then there's that. If you're Gene Hoglan or Sean Reinert or Danny Walker, you know, like any of these guys that are like super active drummers and bands, then there's that. And then you've got all the middle ground, and it's all these dudes that just, you know, I'm knocking off other people's lessons and I'm doing all this other stuff, making flashy videos. It's like, well, that's cool and all, but what are you doing? Like, you're, you know, I don't want to say like you're polluting the airways, but it's like, you know, you're adding a sheen to the top of the foam to when people are trying to rise to the top, you know? So it's like, you're not making it easy for anything else to stand out because you're just making it seem like this is what norm is. And you know, hell, like already this year, there's so many like great records that are out, like the new Necrophobic, the new Harakiri for the Sky, the new oh god, it was just fucking heading things that I've been spinning just this week. Even the new Necrophobic's really good. The new October Tide, bands like that. You know, and it's impossible to keep up with shit. I've got friends that are posting top 100 records list of the year, and I'm like, fuck, I can't listen to 100 records this year. Not new ones, not enough to where I can make a goddamn list or a decision on who's best or better. It's so fucking crazy. And you know, and then people get shut off. They're like, oh, there's no good music coming out. And it's like, you're fucking nuts. You know? If you think the only good thing that came out was anything before Chaos, AD, Sepultura, you know, like if you're that guy, you know, Sepultura never put a good record out, you know, since Beneath the Remains, or, you know, it's all like, you're nuts. Like, there's so much fucking amazing stuff come out over the years, and every single year has more amazing stuff come out.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I do what I do. I mean, I'm in this fortunate position to be able to help promote the bands that I truly care about, whether it's a band that I've loved for decades or a band I discovered last week. Just being able to show off these bands to show that there is good music out there, no matter what style you enjoy. And when you do close yourself off like that, I mean, just like a theme that's been going on here, you know, it's like you're closing yourself off from being able to progress, whether it's discovering a new style or a new band or whatever the case is. So when you do open up like that and you actually make an effort to discover new music, hopefully you do find something new that you can enjoy.
Well, and then you're helping the overall too, though, because if you think about it, like at each one of these guys, it turns into a fucking roadblock. You know, it makes it harder for the rest of us. You know, the people that are in the journalist side, the people that are in the creative side. It's like, you know, how many friends of yours have fallen off and like stopped listening to music, let's say at 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you're like, you're a fucking roadblock. You know, it's like you stopped and you've become a piece of concrete in this path, and you're making problems. You know, it's like, open your mind up, stop being so fucking lazy, which I attribute it to being, because it's like they can't open this spot up anymore. You're like, well, I don't have room for, you know, I don't have room for new information. I can only have old information. It's like any of this new stuff's witchcraft, and fuck that. I don't want witchcraft, and that's what it feels like. And you're like, dude, you're fucking, you know, you listen to rock or progressive rock or metal or, you know, death metal or any of this stuff. It's all like, there is still new stuff out there that's pushing boundaries, and it's trying to, you know, and it's like, how many more ways can we reinvent the wheel? Well, there's still a few ways, you know, there's still ways to make a circle different. You know, it doesn't have to, it's not going to change the shape of the circle, but, you know, goddamn, the edges can be sharper or flatter or rounder or something. Like, there are ways to make this interesting still, so don't fucking give up on it yet.
Oh, that's...
And it's also help the fucking neighborhood, you know? If you close down the shop and you close down and become this fucking roadblock in the road to the neighborhood, it's like, well, then the neighborhood doesn't survive and the neighborhood dies off. It's like, do you want to be the reason or part of the reason why you've killed off a musical scene or a type of music or the popularity of music? Like, you know, get off your ass and do something, or sit at home, cut all your fucking hair off, and stop saying that you're a fucking music lover or a musician.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you just hit the nail on the head for so many aspects of what's going on there. I mean, obviously in 2018, it is quite the struggle to be a musician and still have that drive to be able to do things, I mean, with everything that's going on. But, you know, just the fact that there are so many people that have dropped off, it makes those that are still thriving to discover new music, thriving to make new music, and thriving to support other bands. I mean, it's so important now. And, you know, once more of those drops off, it makes things so much harder. So it's really important to appreciate everybody that wants to still continue what music's all about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like the fight's real. You know, the stuff's real. Everything about it's real still. Obviously, there's, you know, people that get into this stuff for the wrong reasons, or, you know, the guys that kind of float around and, you know, like the Deaf Heaven and King Dude and all that kind of crap that, you know, they show up and pretend to be black metal, and then like, well, we're not really black metal, we're just here. And, you know, it's like, why inject yourself into something that's so serious to so many people and then not be serious about it and then leave? It's like you're bringing a bunch of fair weather fans in, and the only thing worse than hating ass fans or hating ass music listeners is fair weather listeners, because they don't translate into anything long term. And what do you need in a relationship is you need stability in the long term. And so it's we've gotten some offers for some like festivals, you know, speaking of like weird festivals, not even festivals, conferences and shit like that, to where they're willing to pay every expense and all of our fees and everything. And then you look at it and you're like, but for what? Like, why in the fuck would we come out and do this thing? It's like, well, you guys are trending on something, we should bring you out. And I'm all like, do you need a whole room full of people that listen to pop music listening to No Color, No Light? You know, is that what you want? Like, do you want to see everybody fucking staring at each other like, oh, what the fuck's wrong with these people? Like, why are y'all so sad, or what's going on? Like, why are we listening to this? Like, we're trying to party and you guys are bringing this fucking party down. And it's like, you know, have some goddamn integrity and stop selling out just for money or whatever it is. Again, it goes back to the thing, like, what are you doing to benefit your fellow man and your fellow and a woman in the long term? Or, you know, I mean, let's say we're a metal band and we're an emotional metal band. Well, we want to do something that affects and helps. And as you say, somebody's going through a thing and we might be there at the right time and they're like, hey, I feel this thing too, and thanks for making music. You know, fuck, that's the best thing we could ever ask for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so funny because the effects of what I'm going through right now just happened a week and a half ago. So when I was really starting to feel things like getting to a breaking point, I was able to receive the promo, and it's like, oh, I know this is going to be a much darker album. I know there's going to be some things that I can relate to. And when you listen to an outside person, or an outside person listens to something like that, it's like, why would you want to make yourself feel so depressed listening to that kind of music? But to me, it's very therapeutic, like I was talking about before, because, you know, you're seeing other people struggling, and of course, every person goes through different struggles. It's usually never the same thing that they go through, because there's always different circumstances that are going on, but there's so many different themes and tones that you can appreciate on something, and it helps you know that things are going to be okay in the long run if you just keep going.
Well, and yeah, and it helps you feel like you're not alone, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's a kinship, a brotherhood, something, you know, it's, I don't know, it depends on how you even look at it. And it's like, I've had super, you know, close, very, very, very close deaths to me throughout my life, and, you know, they're marked by times and records that were out at the time, and, you know, obviously with the style of music that I listen to, it fucking all coincides. But a few years ago, my niece died tragically, and Anathema's Distant Satellites had just come out, and basically it was, and so that record is super special place in my heart for the length of my life. And, you know, that's one of those things. It's like I couldn't always just put into words what I felt or thought, but musically, like they could, or musically they could like kind of quiet that pain or that beast, or that they could. You know, it's like, well, you don't have to say anything, you can just listen, and they can take you places, just, you know, hell, just with a few simple but beautiful chord progressions, you know, and that's the power of what music does to most of us, or some of us.
Oh, and that's so true when it comes to Anathema. I mean, I've been able to see them twice, once up here in Minnesota, and once back in 2015 for Prog Power, and both times it was so hard not to bring back those tears, especially with some of the songs that they're doing.
That Prog Power show, like, I was there too, like, that Prog Power show was like fucking nuts. Like, that was like transcendental. That was like right after my niece had died. When I went and saw that, I was just like, oh my god, like I can't even, you know, you can't leave. You're just fucking frozen. You know, it's like a statue. And, you know, it's not like I was going to leave. Like, I came fully prepared to be overwhelmed by that, but I didn't know what to expect. And it was, we were laughing because we were there watching it with Tom and the Evergrey guys. They were, you know, we were on tour at the time. Or I don't know if we were on tour or if that was right after that. Yeah, it was the tour we did with them. And we were sitting in there, and I was talking, and we were laughing. I was like, whatever the capacity is for the room there, I think it's 1,000 or something. Yeah. And I was like, there's like literally 1,000 people in here crying right now. What's funny, though, is knowing that, right? So we both know Anathema, we both know the impact they have. Glenn Forrester, I think his last name's Forrester, Harvester. Glenn, from the main guy for Prog Power, you know, it's his festival. When our video and second single, The Banished Heart, the title track, whenever it was released that morning, he went on Twitter and he was all like, he just said, Oceans of Slumber, ... the only band that makes me turn to Anathema to cheer up. And my friend Milton, who's one of the other promoters for the band, sent it to me, and I was like, oh, wow. Like, for him to say that is like a big thing. He's like, you know, it's one of those, like, fucking says that we make him turn to Anathema to cheer up. I'm all like, yeah, okay, you know, then we achieved the goal. we got to a spot that's like, it's not to make anybody suffer, but it's not like, please do know that this is a very dark time and a very dark record. And, it is nice to see people being affected that kind of way, because it's like, this is incredibly real, So, yeah, it was, it's funny. Sad, but funny.
Oh, yeah. Well, to lighten things up a little bit more, obviously with the album coming out soon through Century Media, and, of course, all the promotion that you're doing for it, what's coming up next as far as live shows?
We've got shows. We've got a release show this Friday in Houston, then we have a release show this Saturday in New York at St. Vitus.
Oh, nice.
And then in a month, we leave and go out with Epica and Mirker in the UK and the Netherlands. And then when we come home from that, if everything kind of goes to plan, and I don't know if this is something that you can write about yet, but you should be able to.
Okay.
We're supposed to be direct support for Insomnium for the U.S. tour.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're kind of waiting on, the confirmation was there, but there's some like little details that they needed to hammer out. So, and then past that, we don't know. Past that, I need a fucking vacation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, between everything that you've been part of over the last few years, and, like, whether it's personal struggles or going off to Maryland Death Fest and playing such an insane set with Insect Warfare, or working on this album and then upcoming touring, I mean, it'll be good to recharge your batteries at some point.
Yeah, I hope. I've got my little girl half the time. I have joint custody with my ex, and she's kind of like the thing that keeps everything together for me. So, it's like not so much needing or that I could get a recharge. It's just it would be bizarre to try and even for a weekend, like kind of walk away from normal life and the band and all of my managerial duties for what we do. And it's like just kind of setting the phone and the computer down for a little bit, and also laying the drumsticks down and the keys to my work stuff. And it's like, I don't know if I could even do it. It's like so ingrained at this moment.
Oh yeah, and that totally makes sense. I mean, it's great that you're able to keep the personal life going, be able to keep the career going as well, and just like finding ways to be able to manage both. I mean, some people aren't able to do that, but it's great to see that you are able.
It comes at a cost. I mean, it's brutal. I mean, when I'm home, I work 7 days a week. I'm a professional 20-year professional mover on top of being a 20-year professional musician. So I'm houses and offices and pianos and all that kind of shit, and that's what I've been doing for the greater majority of my life. So I'm an owner-operator at that, and then I leave work and go to rehearsals, 2 to 5 nights a week, depends on which week it is. And my ex-wife is, she knows my life and is adult enough, understanding enough that she works with me on stuff too, So it's a game of synergy right now. It's keeping everything kind of as one and then moving as positively as possible, and then adjusting and adapting as needed.
Yeah, and that is just so important. Just like being able to line everything up, the synergy, just like you were talking about, making sure everything aligns just the way that it should be, and adapting to make things work in the end. And whether it's like a scaled back touring or being able to tour more or whatever the case is, I'm just glad to see that you're able to hit all these different cylinders and be able to maintain that consciousness of being able to keep going.
Well, man, it's all scheduling. I mean, a lot of people, they waste a lot of time. It's like on the record, like I play all the pianos and the synths and all that stuff too. So I'm also an accomplished guitar player and fairly accomplished piano player. Like I tried as best I could to maximize so far my time on Earth. I guess that's the best way to put it. Like it's basically like the time that I had. I tried not to waste too much partying and doing like meaningless stuff. Though of course I did plenty of any of that shit, but I also found time. Like I always found time to commit to relationships or to my instruments or to any of that stuff. It's actually like, to me, it's the key and the importance of life, and it's like it's being in the moment, being in some kind of symbiosis with what you're doing at the time, and it's like I try to be forward-thinking in my spousal situations. I try to make sure that whenever it's something I need to do there, that I focus fully on that. And then when it comes to music or progression or any of that kind of stuff, it's like, I think you know, there's a thing, like you get to a point to where you do a lot of rehearsing in your mind. I don't know if this is something you've ever really come across with other drummers, but you have to do so much, I guess, kind of like math about everything in your head. And so it's like, let's say I got to a point technically where I can play well enough that I could start doing most of the grunt work in my head before I even go to practice. And it's even with writing music and any kind of the compositional stuff. It's like I can do most of this stuff in my head, and then when I have the time, I just kind of suss it out on the physical spot. And you know, and I try to do this as a trainer, because I'm also into like powerlifting and shit. There's this trainer, Josh Bryant, and he talks about these kind of like these mental workouts and mental focuses. And he was like, you know, during the week, you should visualize yourself for 4 or 5 minutes at a time completing these things, these tasks. And I think that I kind of like learned that early on, and it's a thing to where I would complete these learning tasks, you know, in my head. I would get the bare materials to everything that I needed to do, and you know, again, it's like the approach for rudimentary playing over drumming, and I would think it out until I could get there and actually do it. You know?
Yeah, and that's such a great way to look at it, too. I mean, I definitely do that for my own playing as well. I mean, with the band I'm currently in right now, if I ever get sent a riff to be able to have some ideas with, since I don't always get to practice at home, if I don't have my electric kit set up, I can't use my acoustic kit where I'm at. So a lot of times I do have to visualize the parts that I want to try to accomplish. So when I eventually do get into practice, I can just like sit down and be able to try to fit what really fits in there. And then, you know, once you're going over the songs, you can see what fits, what doesn't fit, what can I try, what can I take away. And, you know, just having that mental capacity to be able to visualize things before you do it, I mean, it can definitely go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, it's helped me a lot. I mean, that's, you know, obviously not everything works for everybody, but I've used it to mild to make, I don't know, to some success. It's worked for me for a long time. But it's also, you know, it could be a curse too. You know, maybe you put too much time into a handful of spots or things like that. And you're like, hey, you know, I could try this, I could try this, I could try this, I could try this, and you know, you might lose the good one. You know, like there might be ways an approach to a song, or you know, and it comes back to technology. I mean, fuck, you know, my iPhone, I can just hit note or you know, memo and record sections of stuff just on my hands, or just kind of like break a general pattern down, or, you know, let's say if it's a melodic thing, I can also, let's say a vocal line or a melodic line for like guitar or piano hits me, I can just kind of jot it down, which saves me now, because sometimes you know, you'll have like what you feel like the most brilliant thought that you've ever had, and you're like, oh, let me write this, or let me hum this out, or let me tap this out, and then you go back, and you're like, what the fuck, I think that's terrible. You know, it's like, yeah, what a terrible idea, and you get back, and you're like, so fucking lame. But, you know, and I still do a lot of pad work, a whole lot, and I do a lot of single-handed, like, push-pull stuff to try to make sure that my fingers and stuff stay in relatively good shape, but also to train my wrists to react correctly, because I generally kind of feel that what happens is you use a lot of hand and elbow to hammer out stuff in the beginning, and then you start using your fingers a whole lot, and it's real stationary. The problem is that there's a lot of articulation, and the fingers don't work between swapping so much. So let's say you're doing a lot of blasting, the fingers can't really translate a whole lot if there's a lot of cymbal work or if there's a lot of tom work. You know, you've got to kind of switch between French and German grips to make it work. And so if you watch like Romain Goulan, the guy that wound up playing for Necrophagist, his transition would go from fingers, because he could hammer everything out, and then as he got more comfortable or better with speed, it all turned into wrist, you know. And so for me, I try to stay on a pretty good regiment to balance those, and by doing that, it usually turns into a lot of controlled doubles, like the Thomas Lang type method, the formal doubles as they call them, to where the hand drop starts the single, but the fingers close, or the double, and the fingers close to close the single or the double. And so I do these things to kind of keep my hands in check. You know, it's the push-pull between the left hand, and it's, you know, close and opening, and I'm trying to make sure that's working. And then I do a lot of doubles and inverted doubles. And so by doing that, I'm able to kind of control all of my singles and make them strong. And then obviously tons and tons of fucking paradiddles and inversions, and then 6-stroke rolls and inversions.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like an incredible workout to be able to do that. I mean, you know, just like making sure everything's in check, you know, fingers, wrists, feet, you know, just like all the different styles that can come with that. And you never know what style. I mean, sometimes the technique of how you approach something can drastically change a song. So when you have all of those chops, I mean, it's really important to have.
Yeah, Steve Smith wrote an article a long time ago, and he said that you got to commit an hour a day just to remember the shit that you know. You know, he's like, you just to maintain the crap that you've already learned, you need an hour, and then you need another hour dicking around and figuring out to do shit. And he's like, so in the course of a drummer being such a mechanical and physical job, you know, fuck, it's a never-ending fucking draft your whole life to get anywhere. And you know, practical applications, and you know, there's a big difference between stuffing a click track on and some kid hammering out some variations of linear fills. And you know, if you look at it just sixes and eights over something, or any of this polyrhythmic shit that's blowing up right now, you start looking at that kind of stuff, and it's like, yeah, cool to go against it on a metronome, and it's like, you know, do you really know it, or are you just mimicking, or do you really know, like, do you really understand the application, or do you really feel the application, or are you just playing something that somebody else played? And that's why you see most of these kids doing this Tomas Hawk stuff or the sugar playing, and it's like, you know, it's cool that you can mimic what he's doing, but could you write this stuff on your own, and could you get to this point on your own? And I guess that's like the ultimate goal, you know. It's like understanding and knowing what you're doing, and these guys they're such an amazing benefit, or such an amazing place to start with, like that kind of level. You know, watch some kid that's been playing drums for a year do the bleed double bass lines, and you're like, fuck, that's crazy. But it doesn't mean that they're going to progress and be some phenomenal drummer. You know, not everybody's Tony Royster Jr. It's not a thing like that. Some people have a lot of natural abilities, and they don't really nourish them. And then some people have no ability at all, and they turn into these fucking monster-ass drummers. That's because it's again, it goes back to the training thing I was talking about, is that they've got this theory that these like junior high and high school kids, like the natural athletes, just kind of start on the team, you know, their first string. But then by the time they get to their 11th grade, 12th grade year, that these other kids that had to learn all the fundamentals and all the technical stuff to succeed, well, they start becoming better football players. So then by the time that these guys have been sitting on the bench and, you know, kind of wanting it, well, now these cats are getting, you know, college degree, or, you know, they're getting drafted. And so they get full scholarships, because what happened was, is like, they weren't so naturally good. They had to work for everything they fucking had. And so you get these drummers that weren't so naturally good. They had to work for everything they had. Then these cats turn into fucking absolute monsters. And there's this guy, Alex Cohen, up in New York, who pretty much said he had to fight tooth and nail to get where he's at. Now he's pulling off with ease all of the Marco Miniman Independence books and the Gary Novak shit. And, you know, he's like, you know, I wasn't any good, or I wasn't that good, and I stayed at home until I fucking learned how to play this stuff. And then when you watch him, he's got complete 4-limb independence, and it's, you know, it's frightening. You see that, and you're like, how in the hell are you able to separate yourself so well? And, you know, that's stuff. So everybody wanted to talk shit about Terry Bozzio until they tried to start playing what Terry Bozzio played. You know, he talks about 3 to 5 years to fucking perfect these ostinatos and play against them, and you know, the melodic drumming and all that kind of shit. And today's modern age of impulsive and instant gratification, you see something like Terry Bozzio, and you're like, oh, this guy's just got a million drums and he ain't shit. And you're like, he was the shit in 1978, you know. So you can't knock him for what he's doing then, and so you definitely can't even touch what he's doing now, especially whenever he's playing, you know, some 5 against 6 or 5 against 7 foot pattern, and then soloing over top of that while splitting his left and right hand, and you're like, that's alien level shit.
Yeah,
like you can't even explain that to me, so don't even fucking talk to me.
Yeah, it's amazing what Bozzio was able to pull off. I mean, whether it was like a Zappa writing the Black Page for him, to all the stuff that he's been working on in the last couple of years, years. I mean, it's just mind-blowing, the stuff that he's been able to pull off. And, you know, a lot of people will say that he doesn't need a kit like he has, but it's so perfect for what he does with all the melodic drumming and making sure all the ostinatos and the syncopation works with what he's doing. I mean, it totally makes sense for what he's going for.
Well, you know, you talk about facility and stuff, you know, and it's like a drummer that plays quads in the drum corps. You know, and Bozzio has the ability to, like, he's got quads like moves. Even now, he's, you know, in his 60s, but he's able to articulate left hand with pretty extreme jumps, like melodically, and then the right hand is you know, playing some sub rhythm or some shit on his lower toms, and you know, you see that kind of stuff. And just because somebody makes it look easy doesn't mean it's easy. And you know, obviously, as you say with like the Black Page stuff, any of the Zappa shit that he did was fucking nuts. Like, and the cool thing about YouTube is that shit's just sitting out there for you to watch. And it's like when Vinny C and all that shit was playing, what's happening? You start seeing some of that kind of crap, and you know, hell, even with Vinny going to Jeff Beck and playing like this kind of fusion thing that he's been doing with Beck for a little while. You know, you see why these guys were and still are. You know, you can't knock that shit. It's not like you can just knock them down. They don't just get bad. They might not be able to, maybe not be able to play as fucking fast. But if you look at shit like Jim Chapin and all that stuff that Dom Famolaro used to fucking talk about, you know, Jim Chapin could still whip out fucking accents at, you know, 150 BPM like it wasn't shit, and he was fucking 75 years old. So, you know, it's I guess you don't really lose that shit because it's part of your blood, and you know, it's just part of what keeps the people ticking. You know, that's a cool part about the musicianship as a whole. You know, there's a point to when you're not as good as you have been, but there is never a point to where you're just not any good, especially if you put that much time into it.
Yeah, and you know, that's the important thing about like making sure that you have your identity as well. I mean, when you know what you can focus on, like where you can improve the things that you know that you're, and being able to expand upon that. I mean, as long as you have those three different things constantly in your mind, you're always going to be able to at least keep up what you're doing, if not get better over time.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's physical constraints, you know, with age especially. And I look at that kind of stuff, man, because, you know, I did that Insect Warfare year before last. We headlined Obscene Extreme Fest in the Czech Republic, and there was like 6,500 people there, something like that. Yeah, it was amazing. It was absolutely fucking amazing. It was on a huge stage, so it was really weird for a grindcore band, for us anyway. And then, you know, 8 months later, we headlined NDF, and, you know, and at my state, I'm 39 now, and so I was 39. Yeah, I was 39 then. No, it was 38. You know, I look at stuff like that, I'm all like, you know, we're playing in one of the fastest bands on the planet. And let's say there's 1,000 bands, and I'll be like, okay, well then we're in the top 10 of like the fastest bands on the planet. And I'm 38 years old. And, you know, and I start looking at it like, Jesus fuck, like, what the fuck am I doing with myself? Actually, no, yeah, okay. And we're talking about possibly being able to do another show or festival in some other far-off continent at the end of this year for Insect Warfare. And I'm like, you know, I'll be 40 and still playing in one of the fastest bands on the planet. And it's all like, so it's like I still got it to a degree. You know, I'm still relevant enough and I'm still able enough, and I want to do that while I can because I still very much enjoy the fast music. You know, yeah. And it's like I'm not in any kind of way. I feel like I'm a better drummer now than I've ever been in my entire life. And so then I feel like up to now, being 39, that I've still got a great many years of constructive, maybe influential and impassioned and inspired drumming left in me, you know. And by the time, in 10 years' time, that tune will probably have changed. I don't know. I can't be whipping out 130 BPM fucking blast beats and, you know, whatever the kids call it these days, 260. You know, I can't hammer out 260 BPM blast beats and double bass when I'm 50, or maybe I will be able to. Who fucking knows?
You know, that was a great thing. I want to say it was for MDF. I can't remember, but I remember there was a set you were playing with Insect Warfare where you were recording yourself through your phone, and I was watching it through Facebook, and I just absolutely loved the intensity of what you were doing at that show. I mean, it's just, I could tell that the love was there, you know, the speed, the setup that was going on there, and it's awesome to see that just like after all this time, you know, just, you know, with the speed and the songs that have been created for Insect Warfare, that it continue on to have that brutality.
Yeah, it was surprised me. I think you get like so used to things over time that it's like even with the IW and all that kind of shit. It's in the preparation. There's this saying, prepare, perform, prevail, and it's like nothing's ever luck. It's all opportunity and timing. And so you get to a spot to where if you're rehearsing all the time at 100% or 110%, then 110% becomes the mean. It's like everything that you're basing everything off of. It's like, well, fuck, we always play at this speed, so this speed is just normal. And so things just become easier. It's like lifting heavy weights. Like if you're working in a certain percentage of your maximal ability, then your maximal ability always increases because your body starts getting used to it. It's a nervous system thing, purely scientific, and it's what's cool about it. It's like if you're constantly pushing yourself at these certain speeds and these certain things, then your max ability is always going to stretch out and move further and further and further. And again, it's just time under tension. Like it's everything that any of us can strive at. It takes adversity and it takes time under adversity to improve.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with that. And again, just like I've mentioned a few times, being able to talk to you, it's great to see that you do have these different outlets to be able to continue on with that. I mean, whether it is being in one of the fastest bands out there, or you're able to show off more of the doomy side with Oceans of Slumber, just like getting all those chops in there, just fitting what needs to be in there, and of course making sure that you're playing the music that's going to make you happy, which I think is just a very important thing to take a part of as well. I mean, it's just awesome seeing like everything that you've gone through in your career so far, and still being able to do everything you're doing, always getting better and better. And I imagine the live shows are just getting better and better as well, no matter what project you're a part of. It's so awesome to see that from the outside perspective.
Oh yeah, well thanks, man. I mean, it's just another band, another life's work. And if you look at the thousands and thousands of other people out there doing the same shit, it's probably something along the same lines for each one of us. And it's like, Dirk from X Soil Work, it's like everything he's ever done is like part of his life's work. It's some kind of way to extend what he's done or contributed. It's like any of these cats that have had like continued and big success. It's but at the baseline, they're drummers. Arch Enemy, Paradise Lost. I think Adrian's and I think he might have dropped out of Paradise Lost.
Yeah, he did.
Which is it's unfortunate, but it's also it leaves room for somebody else to come up and do something. Which is nice. For me, it's the duality type band. Oceans now might kind of be typecasted, and most people call it doom, but there's some 260 BPM shit all over that record. I mean, there's tons of plastic stuff. And it's like, for me, like a dream gig would be like playing in Over or playing for My Dying Bride or, bands like that. Triptychon was looking for a drummer, and I actually contacted them about it. But, I love Tom G. Warrior. I'm a metalhead from way back, so obviously Celtic Frost is like a huge deal to me. But, they need somebody that lives in Switzerland or in Europe, so they don't need to do it in Texas. But I would be a good fit for them because of the type of music they play. It is kind of organic, and they need somebody that's not like just relying. They just need a hard-hitting old school type drummer. And so on top of like having an extended, kind of extended facility, I can play a bunch of types of music, a bunch of stuff. I'm also a hard-hitting and not really just a kind of a trigger drummer,
Yeah, and it's actually great to think about that. I mean, when you think of like Triptychon and the two albums that they've been able to pull off, it's just like there's such great diversity that's going on there, and that's a great way to be able to replicate that in Oceans of Slumber. Like you said, there is some typecasting about it just being like doom metal, but like you also said, I mean, there's like 260 BPM blasts that are going on there. There's some great prog moments that are going on there. There's some great somber non-doom parts that are going on there. I mean, it's got a little something in that diversity that I really appreciate. And when you really dig deep into it, I mean, it really is hard to typecast it.
Yeah, I mean, but it is, it always is, because it's got to be marketed, and usually people pick up on whatever the marketing terms are. One of the things that we're trying to combat now is what maybe the label tried to do with Winter, and it's like, we're absolutely not anything like these European bands. We're not like an Epica or Nightwish band, like nothing like that at all. And I don't know if it's a thing, a stigma in the U.S. or something, or the female-fronted bands, because most female-fronted bands here don't succeed. They only succeed if they're screaming and hollering and shit, So for a band like us that has like this really dynamic sound, and we kind of do the doom to death to blues and all that stuff with a very soulful, emotional vocalist, most of the U.S. audiences are like, what? Like, what is this? Is this Lacuna Coil? And they're like, we don't sound anything like fucking Lacuna Coil either. It's like, come on, man. It's like you have this diverse, dynamic, heavy-ass band from America, and you guys don't know what to fucking do with it. So that's why we have to play in Europe so much.
Yeah, sadly, that does make a lot of sense. I mean, I wish there was more people in the United States that were like me, that just had that open-mindedness to be able to see that when you're able to experiment with different sounds and just being able to try some new songwriting that you don't always hear in other bands, that there is something to really appreciate, rather than having to feel like in that case, like being compared to like Lacuna Coil or Epic. I don't hear that in Oceans of Slumber. What I hear is Oceans of Slumber.
Well, yeah, I mean, I try to be, as unique to us as we can, but, we obviously come from, it's the weirdest, it's like combining Morbid Angel with My Dying Bride and Pink Floyd, that's pretty much where we come from. It's, we're, American death metal guys who are also very much progressive rock, and metal guys who are also very much, into Anathema and My Dying Bride and Paradise Lost, Evoken, and, the host of American doom bands here, but we also grew up listening to fucking The Temptations and soul music and Luther Vandross, and it's a very weird melting pot, but copious amounts of Pantera and King's X, because most of us are from the 90s.
And Texas.
Oh, I fucking love King's X.
Oh, I do too. I actually have a wall hanger from their last show here in Minnesota that I picked up, and when I moved into my new place, that was one of the first things that I put up. I mean, King's X, much like Evergrey, a lot of those kind of prog bands in different ways, like I really attach to those kind of bands, and just like everything, that those vocals to those melodies to the riffs that's going on there. I mean, they're such a criminally underrated band, but because of that, I just appreciate them so much more, because there's such a great array of music that they've put out.
Oh man, for sure, and they are incredibly overlooked. It's sad, and I had to hang out with Doug a handful of times, and he's just, it's a bitter outlook, because, he's aged, and, hit the twilight of what he felt like he was obviously in the 90s. He was at his peak, especially like Dogman and Faith, Hope, and Love and all that. And, it's bad. It's bad to think that maybe any of these constraints from the music industry norm could have fought against him. Here's a half-black Native American homosexual guy from up north that moved south, and it's just a lot of stuff, maybe fighting against his success, and also one of the best fucking vocalists that's ever come out of the United States. Phenomenal fucking songwriter and a badass bass player. It's like, so you got a lot of shit going for you, and just the wrong time, Imagine if Gretchen Goes to Nebraska came out 10 years ago and not 30, Imagine if they were able to grow as a band into what they are now. I mean, who knows where they fucking be? I think about that, then you think about bands like Seven Dust, who are kind of held back by, whatever the hell they're held back by. Because, there's like there's nothing more of that band that's huge now with all the kind of middle-of-the-road metal people. Seven Dust has been doing that style of music for a long time. It just didn't take.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how that works, where it's like a band that can be so innovative and write such catchy, powerful music like King's X, where it doesn't really hit the mainstream, when there's other bands that might have been influenced by them that are able to catch on, or a band that's of a different style that might be influencing some other way, they're able to catch on. I mean, you just never know what's really gonna catch on in popularity, and that's why it's so important to stick to your guns, rather than feeling like you have to do trend hopping or doing what sells, because you never know what's gonna be sticking around. What you think is the greatest thing in the world in mainstream eyes could be gone in a couple weeks, so it's important to keep that integrity.
Well, it's embarrassing too, because you've got bands like Machine Head who do hop, like those, Rob Flynn chases trends and stuff for a bit, and you see him go from Burn My Eyes level angsty, kind of knocking off Far Beyond Driven, to the Burning Red, which was kind of heavy but slower, and then when they moved it to their next generation, he almost turned into Kid Rock, and they come back around and did a metal thing with the Blackening or whatever the record was,
yeah.
And it's like, well, we're back, we're going to be Davidi and Ty type Machine Head again, and now he's doing Def Jam poetry style rap shit on Facebook, and it's like, you know, pick a fucking identity or something, or stand up and be whoever it is that you're going to be. You know, I don't know if you're a Machine Head fan or not. I grew up listening to Violence, and
oh yeah.
And I liked Burn My Eyes, and honestly, man, I was just getting into drumming whenever Burn My Eyes came out. When they kicked Chris Contos out, the drummer,
yeah.
I stopped listening to him. It was one of those things. I taught myself how to play because of bands like. Honestly, I taught myself how to play from listening to Ceremony of Opposites by Samael. It's one of my favorite drumming record on the planet. But I saw Vader on tour with Doc, and then I had Burn My Eyes, and I was all like, fuck, this is like, I'm a guitar player, and I want to learn how to play drums because of the records. And so I was so into Chris Contos' drumming on Burn My Eyes, and whenever he had it fallen out, I was going to go jam with Testament. I was like, man, fuck Machine Head. I was like 18, 19 years old, so it was the type of shit you did back in the day when you were 19 years old, and bands change, you're like, fuck them, man, I don't give a shit about them anymore.
You know, it's actually funny with Burn My Eyes. When I really started getting into bands, and on the side, I actually was able to start a metal cover band, and I was able to jam out on Death Church, and that really taught me a lot. I mean, especially with the way the song, the drums just keep getting faster and faster, and it just felt so natural to be able to do that, rather than having it just be like the mechanical feeling that's in the beginning. I mean, you just feel it turn from just like this slow song into a full-fledged thrash song by the end of it, and it's all just because of what Chris is doing on the drums.
Oh yeah, man! What a fucking badass track too. I mean, hell, that whole record. But fuck, it would have been cool as shit if it's an enviable spot, to have a cover band. It's like, so coming from that era, it was probably, Igor Cavalera was like a big deal to you,
Oh yeah.
Oh, good God. The Slave New World and all that shit, and yeah, fuck, I was losing my mind back then. That's when I just started playing drums or looking at drums. But I was always envious of it. Like, I thought Igor was just the baddest thing on the planet. Him and Pete Sandoval at the time. But then, then I started reaching a little further, and obviously there's shit, Lee Harrison and Gene Hoglan. But Lee Harrison was another one of those old school guys that never got the nod that he deserved. I don't know if you know who he is.
Oh,
yeah, okay. But, I don't know how far deep into that stuff you go, but, you look at a dude like Lee Harrison, who was playing open-handed back then and was, like, fucking untouchable, and, just kind of, he had his monstrosity stuff, and he had his terrorizer stuff, but that was just the end of it.
Yeah, and, it's funny with that. I constantly see, one-off shows when it comes to, Terrorizer and stuff like that. It's great to see that the music from back then is still being able to be represented live in some capacity.
Yeah, for sure. It sucks that there's two Terrorizers.
Yeah, exactly.
That's dumb. I actually saw, I played a show with the Nausea-based Terrorizer, and they're fucking incredible. And then what did I see? I saw Sandoval's Terrorizer a couple of years ago. They were good too. It was cool. It was weird though. It's a little weird dynamic that's turned into, especially with Lee playing guitar and then Pete playing drums. I played a bunch of shows. We toured with Monstrosity and my old band, Infernal Dominion, probably 15 years ago, through Texas and South Texas, West Texas, and all that stuff. Here, it's a big-ass state. You can play 6-7 shows here.
Oh, yeah.
But we played with them, and, it's fucking incredible to watch and play every night. And what was that? Maybe about 20-something, 23, 22 when we were playing those, maybe 21. And, I remember him even back then. He was kind of shit-talking. He's all like, you're a really good drummer, but you need to, let's make sure that we're hitting hard on everything, all this type of shit. I'm like, all right, man, I'll work on that. I'll make sure that I'm hitting hard. And then John Allen from Sadis, I don't know if you ever listen to Sadis.
Love Sadis.
Oh, man, so he lives here in Houston, outside of Houston now. We've been hanging out for a handful of years. Always drum stuff and kind of get together whenever we can. But he's the same type of dude, he's all like, you remind me a lot of myself when I was younger. But it's cool to that camaraderie. What's neat about the industry is you usually can wind up, you're going to run into your people, and the people you look up to or admire, or the people that influence you in these types of ways. Like, you're going to run into them, and you hope to be good enough to be inspiring or to be, something to them. It's not like, hey, I grew up listening to you playing, and you were a real big influence on my playing, and they're like, well, you're a really good player, so that's fucking cool as hell. And it's like cool to see that you've had some kind of impact, or they have had some kind of impact on you, and then when you turn back around, it's like having acknowledgement from a teacher, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be such a great gratifying feeling. I mean, when you finally do get to meet the people that influence you. I mean, with what I'm doing, I mean, I'm able to do that so often with like all the different drummers, and yourself included, where I'm able to have like these great conversations, just like talking music, talking drums, talking real life stuff, and just like having that kind of effect on there, and just like knowing it's like, wow, listening to their albums when I was really focusing on what I can accomplish as a drummer, and just being able to have like these real cool conversations with them. I mean, it's such a great feeling to do that, especially when they can just be as nice as can be, and they're just as interested to talk to you, and you're able to get some great conversations out of them.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's just all the same type of shit. There might be, obviously there's going to be some like self-absorbed, like, you can't touch me and you're welcome type fucking people out there, but it's like, oh, fuck them and whoever they are. But you get to a thing that's, it's like, with so many new people, it's always like a flashy, like, oh yeah, did you check this out, or look at this guy, and you're like, maybe you have people in our age bracket, or the listening time, like, you hold on to certain shit, but people are losing their minds about polyrhythmic playing and stuff, and you're like, well, Jerry from King's X has been doing polyrhythmic playing forever. It might not be as flashy as what you're hearing now, but it's definitely, he's been playing 5/4 rhythms his whole fucking life,
Oh, yeah.
And then homeboy from fucking Confessor, you're like, here's a band with no click track who's been playing ridiculous fucking polyrhythmic fucking thrash metal forever, and sadly I can't fucking remember his goddamn name. My buddy Twitch is like the biggest fucking Confessor dude on the planet, so he's like inundated me with Confessor shit for the past 15-20 years. And it's like these drummers, the drummers from the first couple of Atrocity records, the drummers from Brutality and all this stuff, these American bands. It's like, you remember Disincarnate?
Yeah,
James Murphy's band.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the guy that was lucky enough to play on that, he's a fucking incredible drummer. The fucking name escapes me. It's been a long time since I've had to drag that name up. He plays in some like industrial band in Dallas now too, and it's like, it's all these guys that had to cut their teeth the hard way, they had to learn all the stuff the hard way, and they had to be like the real thing to get the gig. Like, they weren't just going to be some flash in the pan. It wasn't like an old grindcore record where all you had to do was shake and rattle and fight your way through an album. Like, these guys had to actually be very fucking good, atheist drummers and pestilence drummers and all that type of shit. Fuck it, what was his name? From fucking Coroner, Marquis.
Oh yeah.
Meat and potatoes, bare bones guy, but also fucking incredibly good at fucking playing that type of music. But I guess for Coroner, it was mainly about the bass player, so they was fucking shredding stuff.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, and again, just like with all of those great examples, I mean, there's such a great array of what was shown off there before that you could look things up on YouTube. I mean, like when you put on an atheist album compared to like a Visceral Disgorge album or a sadist album, it's just like there's so many different styles that was going on there, and they were just trying to be themselves. They weren't necessarily like looking things up and just like constantly trying to be better than everyone else. I mean, they were just trying to improve themselves, and whether that was like the fastest double bass they could, the fastest blast that they doing the most meat potato beats that they could do, just like making sure that they could just build themselves up the best that they can, get those gigs that they could do, and just being able to keep that going.
Oh yeah, I mean, dude, look at fucking Swallowed in Black. I mean, there are many drummers now that can play that shit. I mean, that's like a level, that old sadist stuff is a level of intensity that just wasn't existing back then. And I read interviews about the guys recording like Arise and Beneath the Remains. Whenever, who was it? I think Ross Robinson do Beneath the Remains, or I was reading an interview with him or Colin Richardson, and he was talking about how he had to sneak all of his stuff down to Brazil to track, and they basically had to track 24 hours a day to do Beneath the Remains or Chaos AD. I forgot what the story was, because he got to the border and they like basically bribed him for like $250. They let him come in with like a case full of drumsticks and guitar strings and heads and all kinds of shit, and to see that these guys are like squeaking these records out in these crazy fucking conditions. And it's even John and John from Status and Gene from fucking Dark Angel and Ended to Death. You see these guys and the stuff they had to go through to track these records, and you're like, there's a ton of adversity and a ton of battling. And Sean Reiner and the fucking Human record for Death and the stuff that he had to do. And that whole story with Death was basically Chuck gave him a demo of all the stuff he wanted, him and Masvidal, and they pretty much constructed a record for him, and that created, I guess, in essence, technical death metal, which was fucking amazing.
Yeah, I mean, again, just like a Death is a great example of that. I mean, when you go from like Scream Bloody Gore and then you go to Human and then you end with Sound of Perseverance, I mean, you see a band that's like who changed so much with every single album while being able to progress like that. And especially when it comes to that Human album, I mean, when it gets into that technical death metal and of course, some progressive death metal that was going on along with that too. I mean, it's like they didn't know that they were going to just be creating a new genre there. They were just writing what they felt was the right thing to do.
Well, man, I mean, it's fucking, it's a scary proposition. I mean, it's like not even that, my band's doing anything that's like fucking, changing the world, but like, we venture off into new territories. And, we've got to kind of worry that we're going to alienate, because if you look at what Focus did for Cynic, and then you look back on the fucking live footage from the tours that they did for Focus, there were 20 people at the shows, and now all of a sudden Cynic's this thing, and it's like, well, they had to wait 20 years to fucking reap the benefits of what they did, because whenever Focus came out and they were working on the stuff that became Aeon Spoke or Agora or whatever, they lost, nobody was interested. It was too fucking out there. It was too weird for them. And, Death had this lineage, of course, from Scream Bloody Gore, Leprosy, and all that shit. They did Spiritual Healing, and James Murphy was on it. They had this thing. They were built up. They did Human, and it just blew everybody's fucking mind. But Cynic was at the same time. Roadrunner put the record out. It had these weird digital vocals on it, and then it's like, it was cool to like it after a few years, after the band broke up. You completely destroyed their hopes and dreams, and like, oh, you actually did redefine a whole genre of music, but we didn't want to let y'all know at the time, to the point where you gave it all up, But and then what, like 10 years ago or 7 years ago, they put out
Traced in Air.
Yeah, which, Jesus, like, what a fucking beautiful album. That and Retraced. But yeah, you get to walk out on stage 15 years later, 20 years later, and everybody's like, oh, fuck, we love you, and Paul Masvidal sitting there like, what the fuck were you 20 years ago? I quit, pulled my hair out. I went out on a ledge to create something, and I thought it was really special, and it actually was really special, but at the time you guys hated it, so fuck y'all. And also, like, everybody in the band's gay, and like, what turmoil that must have been, and to have to, like, hide yourself and whatever it is that you were at the time, it's like, it makes you feel extra bad for them, to a degree, It's like, when Sean Reiner in his interviews was talking about they'd be playing these huge festivals, and all these dudes are out there losing their mind about it, and he's thinking to himself, like, you guys like some really gay music, like, this is, it's coming from this other place, and you're super into it, and, and he was saying that he was laughing about it to his head, but, I look at that, I'm all like, it sucks, man, because you guys did these tours, and you had to carry on in these ways that really weren't who you were, and you had to, like, stifle these things about yourself, and you went out on a ledge and created music that people rejected at first, probably made you doubt yourself as a musician, or your ear or your ability to create. So it's like, think about that kind of stuff. It's like, I just feel nothing but compassion for the situation for the people. It's like, well, that sucks.
Yeah, and I was one of those people. Like, I was not familiar with Cynic at the time, and then it wasn't until they reformed and was doing those one-off shows over in Europe, and it was just like, wow, I really hope that these guys stick together and they write some new music and they're able to keep going like that. And then they wrote Traced in Air, and I just fell in love with that, and finally got the opportunity to be able to see them live with the lineup that they had at the time, being able to promote that. And it's just like, it was awesome to see that they were able to have that revival of the sound and get that appreciation, even though things are much different now with Sean got out of the band. I mean, it's great to see that they were able to really appreciate the Focus music at some point in time and be able to get the name out there.
Oh yeah, for sure. I had that. I don't know which one it was. I had a comp back to that thing. You know, it was like one of the at Death's Door or something like that, and it had the demo that they had done. Maybe Euroboric Forms or something was on there, and I remember hearing that, and I was like, "Fuck, this is badass." It's like, not to bang on an old drum. It's like Sadist with all this extra shit in it. It's like, oh, it's so cool. It's back when Roadrunner was just putting everything out awesome, and I remember hearing the demo, and I was like, "This is badass." And then they were like, "Oh, it's the same guys as Death and Human." It's like, "Oh, I know that record too." Like, "Oh, that makes so much sense." And so then I had the record, I had the CD, and I followed everything that they ever did, from Gordian Knot to Aeon Spoke and Agora and all that shit. I was a fan. I was a fan of most anything that Paul or Sean or Steve or any of those guys did. So I was super into it.
Oh yeah, totally. And I still remember at the show that I went to, I mean, it was very much my phase of discovering as much music as I possibly can, and with Sean Reinhart being such a huge influence on me, it was just one of the best feelings in the world before I had any of this stuff going on, where I was able to talk to my favorite bands like this. But just being at the show and grabbing the Cynic set list like it was the last time I was ever going to be able to see them, and just being so happy. It's like, wow, they really got to play all of these songs, and I got to see them live. I finally got to see Sean Reinhart play live. It was such a
yeah, for sure, man. It's like it's a special place that it holds for us. It makes me pity people that follow popular music. They don't have that kind of connection with anything that they do. And it makes me envious of those people in a way too, because I couldn't imagine having a style of music that you enjoyed that they played on every single thing and every single place that you went to. Like, how lucky are you? Like, if I liked pop music, that means I can hear the type of music that I liked everywhere in the world. But I'm also not going to have any kind of connection to it in any kind of visceral, meaningful, or impassioned way. And I'm also not going to remember any of these artists in 5 years. And so, we're in a spot like that. We listen to music that lasts generations, that lasts, decades. And it's like what you're talking about. You go see somebody, it's like you wait your whole life to see Sean Reinhart play, and then you finally do, and you're like, oh, it's everything I wanted to be. It wasn't disappointing in any kind of way. It blew my mind. Like, there's all this inspiration and influence I've ever had out of this person, and he's sitting right there fucking destroying the place.
Yeah, and again, it's just like when you go to a pop show or something like that, and you're spending X amount of dollars to hear just the songs that you heard on the radio rather than anything else that was ever released on that album, if they even release albums anymore. And just only getting that connection of, oh yeah, I remember that being on the radio, rather than buying the album, sitting down and listening to it, picking out your favorite tracks, hoping to hear those songs like you would hear in rock and metal. I mean, with Cynic, I mean, with it, going to them, I mean, it's awesome that they didn't have a major hit, because they were able to play so much of what they've done with their albums, and they didn't have to worry about making sure that they were playing the hits. They were just playing what they wanted to.
Yeah, it's fucking badass. It's fortuitous for the musician and the listener. It's like, this is amazing. And again, the resurgence of that was awesome. Even though, the kindly being the Prius, I really wasn't that much into that record. It just seemed like it was, the incubation time for Trace and Air was right, the inspiration behind it and everything else. And then when you got to do it, material, it's kind of like, maybe I'm maybe more time to write, or my thoughts anyways. And then, what did I say? My song was Between the Buried and Me on that tour.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't a super big Between the Buried and Me fan, still not. Blake's a fucking staggeringly badass drummer, obviously. And everybody in the band's incredible. But I didn't have anything going for me and with them at the time to make me stick to them. And I've tried a handful of times to listen to them. It's not my thing. It's not what I wanted or needed. But Cynic was just, and I remember just being there to see them, and it was a packed house, and they fucking destroyed the place. And I was just like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. And then I left. I left because I didn't want to, for one, I didn't want to just sit and watch a band. I didn't want to see and judge them, I didn't want to be like, oh, fuck them, and Cynic played, they suck. And give them their due respect and not be pissed off about it. So I went home, and I was on a high. It was like, fuck, I finally got to see Cynic, and This is great. A friend of ours from here in Houston is like kind of like a legendary bus driver, and he drove for the Human tour. And so there's all this footage from the Human era behind Sean playing drums, and it's all from him, like it's his actual footage. And so if you go on YouTube and you type in like Sean Reinhardt, Human era death, and it's from kind of behind him to a little bit to the side and behind him, and it shows him playing all stuff. I've had a dub of that VHS tape for like 20 years that I never could, I couldn't share because that's how it worked back then.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just had this tape, and we'd have parties and shit at my house. I'd plug in that tape, and they'd take this shit out. Everybody's like, oh my God. Because hell, 20 years ago, you used to have a massive collection of VHS tapes. That's how you had everything. You kind of had to swap people for shit. I had some behind-the-scenes footage of Morbid Angel and Deicide, and, out of that, I would be able to trade and get other kind of shit. But, times have changed.
Yeah, I mean, back then, it's like it was so much harder to be able to record stuff, making sure that all the batteries were in there, making sure that you had, like, the right camcorder to be able to pull things off. And now you get, like, a 4K quality on your cell phone. I mean, being able to have all of that, especially with the Human era, I mean, being able to see the footage from there, even if it is downgraded with a VHS quality, I mean, just being able to see it back then, I mean, that has to be so cool to be able to see that at the time.
Oh, hell yeah. And not to mention back then, if to have a camcorder was $800.
Yeah.
So, this guy's on tour with all these bands, $800 camcorder, fucking videotape them, and, it's where he had a lot of the old Exorbitant footage, a lot of the Death, Morbid Angel footage, and, it was just a benefit. He was in the studio whenever they tracked Focus, Human, and, Testimony of the Ancients, or Malleus Maleficarum. Well-connected guy who's always in the right place at the right time. He kind of, to sit in on Pestilent recording sessions is a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah, totally. Oh, yeah, that's just so cool. And, it's just like, again, from the fan perspective, I mean, it's amazing that you're able to have, like, all these great opportunities, meeting the right people, like, people that you're able to have, like, real friendships with, and, like, whether it's touring together or just hanging out when you're close to home, or seeing people on the road, or talking to them online or the phone, or whatever the case is, just, like, being able to keep these connections, be able to have, like, all these great stories, and, just, like, knowing the paths that everyone has gone on. I mean, it's so great to be able to look at that in hindsight.
Oh, yeah. Well, I honestly attribute it to one major thing, and it's like real people and real metalheads. It's been like the common ground, and it's like, we toured with My Dying Bride. It was one of my favorite bands on the planet, and, I had the opportunity to have, like, real connection with these people, and it was just, like, legitimate love for these certain types of bands of music, like, brought us together, and it's, so, like, I'm still in contact, and I'm still friends with them. I mean, we were at a show in Hamburg that we played and we were hanging out after the show, and Lena, the bass player, was like, "So you're in insect warfare?" And I was like, "Oh, shit." And she's all like, "Oh, I'm such a big fan." And I was like, "Oh, that's amazing. Like, you're in My Dying Bride. I'm like a huge fan." So it's super cool. And I was in Mexico City. We played a show with a band called Hackovitz. And Hackovitz is Antimo from the Mexican band Discord. And he's in a handful of other bands like Ravagers. There's a whole contingency of these like super legendary Mexican bands. And this guy's like the top. And I played a show down there. And we're kind of hanging out a little bit. And I was like, "What's up?" I'm Dobber. He's all like, "I'm from Insect Warfare." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, fucking huge fan." I'm like, "Well, I'm a huge fan of the Osmos era, Discord stuff that you've done. Obviously I know his whole background." So there's like these, it's like these cards and these keys into doors that you don't normally do, because we have like this general love for metal and for what we do, and then we have this genuine appreciation for what each other does, and so that's how we wind up making these connections. It's like a professional connection for something that's very subjective or objective, depends on how you look at it. And so, when we toured with Enslaved, like, I fought with the guitar player. Like, I was in a fight about who's a better vocalist, and Dylan or fucking Freddie Mercury. It's like those types of things. Like, that's what we bonded over. And of course, I'm fighting for Deep Purple and Ian Gillan, and he's trying to tell me how Freddie Mercury is the best thing ever, and I'm like, "Fuck you." And then we're bringing up obscure ass fucking video footage, and we're sitting in a bar in Spain arguing over this shit. And I'm trying to show him Deep Purple on the Battle Rage touring tour, He's trying to show me Freddie Mercury live at Wembley Stadium and all this shit. And I'm just like, agree to disagree, man.
It's also awesome to see that too. I mean, like when you look at social media and like you look at the comments on something, I mean, you can just see like the anger over something, like if someone doesn't agree with you on a style of music. But between you guys, I mean, being able to like sit in a bar and be able to have a discussion like that, and you know, just like being able to argue, not really like having an actual fight over it, but just being able to enjoy each other's company while trying to show off each other's side.
Well, yeah, you know, man, and it's like at the end of the day, it's that's the metalhead, and that's the coolest thing in the world to me is like, you know, they'll fight you tooth and nail arguing over Iron Maiden fucking songs or Merciful Fate songs, and you know, they'll fucking cite references and shit. Like they, you know, we know what the fuck we're talking about, we know why we're arguing, and I think that like the true spirit of like the metalhead is kind of like dying off a little bit with the newer generation, and it sucks. You know, like people aren't arguing over the best enslaved record, and people aren't arguing. You know, it's not like, well, this is clearly the better record. And, you know, it's that type of maybe, you know, some kind of that type of animosity over whose is better is a thing that keeps things alive.
Yeah, and, you know, also getting back things around, you know, getting into Oceans of Slumber again, you know, it's just like when you know that you can progress yourself, you always want to be able to progress in your songwriting. And, you know, just like the more that I do listen to the new album, you know, it's like I'm able to see the progression from the first album and, you know, the production-wise, the songwriting, everyone's abilities on the album. I mean, having that hunger to and thriving to be able to write the best songs possible, really putting your heart and soul into it. I mean, whether it's you discussing music or writing music yourself or playing music live, I mean, as long as you have that wants of progression in there, I mean, it's such a great feeling.
Oh yeah. I mean, but you know, none of that can happen. You can't become a great chef without taste, you know, and you can't become a great band without influences and taste, you know, and you've got to feed things into that constantly, and those things, you know, what you put in your body changes how your body composition or what you're able to taste or do, and what you taste or you do musically, you know, that's how I look at it. It's like, you know, we've got to progress, and, you know, we did in ways on this record. We also utilized things that we knew before, so it's like, you know, some of the old and a lot of the new, and, you know, it's just where we were then, you know, it's where I was, where Kenny was. Again, it's a window in time, and we'll always be able to look back on the record and know where we were at that time, and it's always going to be a haunting reminder of where we were. And, you know, we've got plenty more terrible things and shit to reflect on, so we've got plenty of inspiration for the next record or two, you know?
Yeah, I mean, with that, I mean, obviously, with all the dark things that can happen in life, I mean, they can either destroy you or you're able to progress with that, but at least one good thing that does inspiration that you're able to draw upon when you're creating new music.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and even if it's coming from I actually experienced this, or to a hypothetical, or to an empathetical spot, you know, let's say you just want to write a story from the eyes of something, or you want to try to convey a message in a way. It's like, you know, we always have a way to weave around and do these things. It's just we got to make sure that we're pushing forward as musicians and able to, you know, not be limited by anything. It's like anything that we want to say or do, we've got the ability to do, and we have to maintain that and get better at that. So if we become better storytellers, then we have better stories, you know?
No, absolutely.
And that's all we can hope for, shoot for.
Oh, so true. Well, awesome. Well, once again, you know, like looking at the time now, thank you for spending so much time to be able to talk to me about everything that's going on. I mean, whether it's talking insect warfare, whether it's talking Oceans of Slumber, whether it's talking about all these, I've learned so much from this interview, and it was awesome to be able to get your insight into everything that's going on in your world right now, past and present, and in the future as well. I can't wait to see all the touring opportunities that you guys are going to be getting, the writing opportunities when the next album cycle comes around. I just can't wait to see what's going on. I mean, if this is what you guys are doing right now with the Banished Heart, which of course is coming out next Friday, I can't wait to see where the legacy of the band continues to keep going, because this is easily some of my favorite music I've heard in a long time. It's easily going to be one of my favorite albums of the year, and I just wish you guys nothing but the best, because I love what you guys are doing, and I know that passion's in there.
Well, fucking hey, man, thanks a lot. Hopefully we make it up in your neck of the woods, and we can in person hang out, and you can meet everybody else.